indie game garden.
Melanated Game Kitchen is a co-op studio and collective of BIPOC game creators focused on the creation and curation of unique interactive experiences revolving around culture. Fittingly, they run a game jam series called Culture Bytes. Every quarter they host the jam, and the theme of each jam is something that is relevant to the members of the connected diasporas they represent. It's an honor to have Creative Director Timothy Staton-Davis on the show today to discuss MGK's mission, goals, and outlook on games and the folks that create them. You'll also hear more about Tim's take on the importance of game jams and community in games. And we have the honor of hearing more about Tim's own career, which has kind of spanned many different genre-defining games, and just a very interesting story and take on game design from his unique intersectional perspective. So it really means a lot to have him on the show. He's a veteran of the game industry and has a great perspective on indie games in particular, and the co-op structure of designing them. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get into the questions, I just thought it was such an interesting way that we connected, where just a few blue sky comments and then a prolonged email back and forth. And I'm so happy to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here and making time in your busy schedule.
Yeah, for sure. That's what social media is for. I feel like in one way, when it's being used properly, it's just connecting people and finding people to chat with from different places who are connected by mutuals or whatever. It's oh yeah, that's great. So I'm glad you even prompted it in the first place. I was that sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, it's such an honor to have you on. And to start, I would love to hear what Melanated Game Kitchen is in your own words, a little bit about the mission of the organization, and anything else you would want to share up front for folks who might not know what it's all about.
Yeah, sure thing. So Melanated Game Kitchen, or short MGK, or the Kitchen, we're a collective and a co-op studio that's made of various game creators and creators of all kind of backgrounds, that we focus on the creation and curation of unique interactive experiences that are focused around culture. So we have a community in our Discord space that we have cultivated over the last 3 years or so, of other developers and creators who share and participate in game jams together to grow in their craft. We host game jams throughout the year and also do other small events, primarily as a collective and a studio. Our main focus is on creating experiences that do reflect culture, that have commentary, or that do influence culture in the sense. So we kind of have started primarily from the African diaspora as one of our key focus areas over the last couple of years, as especially for our game jams in particular, where every jam has a particular theme that's kind of revolving around something that's more relevant to members of the diaspora, and trying to explore themes that we don't usually see in jams per se. But then from there, in this community space, we've expanded to also doing contract work for co-dev, working on our own games, which we have a couple in production now, with other creators from all over the globe, essentially, and creating a business and creative network, so to speak, of people who are working on things that are trying to be culturally relevant, authentic, do things with a good business background and make it sustainable, right? And then also be a supportive space for developers of all backgrounds, to work together and to have their work be put out and get recognition for it, right? So that's kind of our big thing, as pushing the co-op structure in the game space more, along with other people who are doing a similar kind of thing, and finding ways that we can make it sustainable with the changing industry as we're going through it right now.
Yeah, it's a wonderful organization, and one that I think folks can get just a quick like primer on or vision of just on your itch page, and we'll share all the relevant links in the show notes.
We were a member-based studio, so
Yeah.
if there are folks who are listening in, or folks that all that, like from all aspects of the game creation process or this or the content creation process, we have rolling membership. Feel free to tap in and check in with us if we have openings at the moment, right? And we're always kind of bringing more people into the space to collaborate together. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine for both folks who are just wanting to check out the games or make games, it is a very supportive community to be a part of. And I think that is so important in a space that I think in particular today, as we see kind of the post-capitalist way that is kind of ravaging the game industry. Those types of spaces are becoming more and more, I think, vital for just creators to feel like they are in community, and so that they can keep going and keep making art in whatever capacity they want to, be it commercial or hobbyist or what have you.
Ravaging is a good word.
Yeah. And that's why I find it so important to be talking to you and really appreciate you taking the time again. With that in mind, I was wondering, like, what are the origins of the organization? Like, what was kind of the ethos behind founding MGK? And I would love to hear more about that process. Like, was it just you and a few co-conspirators, like being like, we need to do this? Or what's kind of the story there?
Yeah. It is kind of interesting. So I've been making games for about a decade now. A lot of AAA studios in particular over the years, and have been able to, I think, pretty much since I started with the first games that I made back in college or even pre-college with some friends, hobbyists, right? Just like a few of us making stuff in small teams of 5-6 people, right? And building something for a client or building something for ourselves. I've always kind of had some touch into like independent development, right? In some capacity, right? Of like self-expression, of training your skill sets and learning new things, right? Of having to study on your own, because how else are you going to learn the stuff, right? So that's always been a tenet for me as a developer. And over the years, I've always also had another hand into community spaces, right? As I have been moving across the industry over time. So whenever I moved to a new area of a new region, a new state, right, part of my effort was connecting with who's in the local scene, right? And so I was fortunate enough to kind of get a start at Seattle, and got exposed to the Seattle Indies community, right? Which a lot of us are familiar with as being one of the largest indie communities that are like in a local space in particular. And so that was a good influence on me of seeing how strong a community could be around developers and creators and what value that brought, because over time they start supporting each other, they start working on games, they start collaborating, they start doing things like the Slice and these other events that are putting a platform up for these developers. And so that gave me a good reference point, a foundational reference point, I would say, starting in Seattle. And then as I started moving across the industry, and as things changed with the layout, with people being more global, with the work from home stuff that started and the remote work that started, having to connect the people more globally because you weren't seeing people in person at the same way anymore, right? So that gave me a good foundation to kind of pull from. And since then, when the Game Kitchen community first started, it initially started from a similar thread of wanting to create things with other people, even as a professional, right? Because professionals, we are so busy working 9 to 5 or 6 or 7, whatever, like 40 plus hour weeks to get these games done. And so it became a thing of, I want to also still have a foot into, the development space, the indie space, but in a way that doesn't require it, in a way that doesn't say like I have to dedicate all of my free time to getting some project finished or whatever. And so we
Totally.
initially, friends of mine, were just like, let's like just do our own little game jams for a bit, as like professionals, right? And like host a space where we give each other space to like jam for, a week, 2 weeks, something of that nature that give us more room. Right. And this was before it became popular to do that, I think, because now it's more popular to do that these days. But
Yeah.
back then it was, you only had the weekend jams. And so we kind of branched from that where we just started hosting these jams casually in our space as our Discord kind of started to gather other friends who came by. We decided to expand it and put it online, right, on itch, right, and also do some curation. So about like what types of things we wanted to jam about and why, what was interesting. And so everything kind of kept snowballing from there, where it's like as we expanded, as our community space grew, then we started to kind of make things that were kind of good, right, that had some merit to them, that had intention, but like were also like interesting games. And so then it became a thing of how do we support these games that we're making in these spaces? How do we get them visible? How do we bring money and funding? And so that kind of snowballed to us like, oh, well, let's do that. Like we're making the space, we have the people, right? We should make a formal entity so that we can actually support these works and start collaborating with our community partners, with our other friends, with our other developer studio friends, right, and trying to actually like make something that's going to last. And me, we have like a small team as far as like our leadership team in particular. And so me, I'm kind of like the creative head of things in terms of figuring out where we want to go and how we want to do it. And so my whole thing was like, if we're going to do business together and figure things out, then we need to do it in a way that's like future oriented, right? And my perspective is that cooperatives and similar business structures that are more you know sustainable and worker friendly, right, is the future, right? And
Yeah.
so if I was going to establish something, it was going to have to be that. And so that's why we decided to do the co-op in the first place. And after talking with plenty of other people who are doing it and getting recommendations and stuff, that's why we decided to do it. And that's why we're committed to making it work in a way that's going to be equitable for all of us involved, and hopefully have all of us be able to keep doing this for the foreseeable future. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's I think it's something that has been, front of mind for me in this era, as I mentioned before in the interview, talking about like game studios closing or what have you. We're recording this on a Monday when like Xbox just laid off, another 1,500 people, and with more layoffs coming. And it's a sort of thing where in the past I've talked with guests about how, that is spawning these like 2 to 3 person teams or solo developers making games. And you're seeing like such a proliferation of indie games on platforms like Steam. But it's another thing to talk about not necessarily, 1 or 2 people making a game, but a collective that is supporting one another in the way that MGK has been, founded and is continuing to function. And I love your idea of like co-ops being the future, because I think one of the things that is talked about a lot, and that I talk with game devs a lot and read about a lot, is how like solitary and lonely of a process making a game can be, particularly from an indie perspective if it's just 1 or 2 people. And I think it's beautiful to like have community in games, whether that's just interfacing with fans or talking to folks just like we're doing now. But it's another thing to like be in community with other game devs who know what's going on and who can support each other in that way. And so that's why I think it's so special to have spaces like MGK. And I think hearing you talk about it is so eloquent and inspiring to me as just someone on the outside. So I appreciate you being willing to share. Another game, well, with that in mind, there's a couple games that you wanted to mention as far as like that are currently in production at MGK, and I want to hear about those after having heard about kind of the origins and what's up with MGK today. There's Clock Out at 2, which is kind of the first project that I wanted to talk about. Can you talk about the project? It's currently in production. Anything you'd like to share about it, I would love to hear.
For sure. So Clock Out at 2, we kind of call this our flagship game at the moment because this was the one that really set fire to the team as far as like, okay, like we really need to make sure we can support this kind of game, right?
Yeah.
It started from a game jam a couple years ago. With some of my friends and other people who showed up, Japan and in the United States. And the whole premise of it is that you are playing as a woman from generally, a diverse background, Afro-Latina background, or at least originally Afro-Latina background, who has to navigate the workplace. But things are not as they seem. Things are dark, and there are underhanded things afoot, and so it plays on this thing of what you see is not what's actually happening, and so we borrow from thriller and the horror genre to create an experience where you have to navigate the corporate workspace. It's kind of like Get Out, the movie, and I think we kin it to like Severance, which is also like really popular in the last couple of years after we started the game. But is our kind of take on how do you navigate a hostile, workplace and survive. And as the main character, Celia, you are structured to kind of repeat your days until you survive. And so it's a bit of like a roguelike narrative adventure game where you play into, you actually have like activities that you do, little mini games that you do, and then these kind of like conversations that you have to navigate through, and you have to manage these different stats in order to, gain information and find ways to actually like navigate your way to being able to like survive the day, essentially. So it's really interesting stuff, and it has resonated with a lot of people so far from the shows that we've done in person at different conventions with just the demo. So it's really exciting to see how this project's going on. And, we don't have a release date just yet, but we are looking for a release soon. And also trying to get a little bit of extra funding and support so we can add some other extra bells and whistles, especially the voice acting in particular. As a visual novel, that would be really amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating mashup of genres. And I am interested in the fact that it sounds like it's a like number of different creator perspectives going into making the game, and how that has kind of impacted it as a product itself. If you're just talking about like video game genres, it sounds like it's kind of a roguelike, kind of a visual novel, kind of a management sim. It almost reminds me of like Consume Me in some of the ways you've been describing it. And it's so cool to see how a variety of perspectives can create a game that is almost like defying genre in and of itself. And it's another reason why I think it's so important to have a co-op of game makers, because you get these games that are like, nothing in particular. They're kind of a mashup of all these different things. And specifically, so Clock Out at 2 has a Steam page. It's on my wish list, and folks should go wish list it there. It reminds me a lot of a book I read, which I think is also a TV show now, called The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Delilah Harris. And it's particularly about like the publishing industry. But it's about like, it kind of, works these horror tropes into the workplace, with this, main character who has a marginalized perspective, and kind of feels that pressure, in a way that's unique and I think a very important read. And it goes to show how media like this can really, I think, create solidarity with folks who share that intersectional identity, but also for folks like me who do not and have that that kind of aha moment of being able to at least get a little bit of that interiority and that perspective, which is so important. And I think games can do that too. So lots of cool things about Clock Out at 2. Super excited for it.
I'm glad you drew that comparison. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's another reason why I'm so excited to check out the game. Another unannounced project you have in production that you kind of wanted to tease on here is called Project Bride. And it's your studio's first foray into kind of the action platformer genre. Anything you want to share about that one?
Yeah, I think the main thing, we're still in the pre-production phase of the project, so we were doing a lot of prototyping and formalizing the kind of experience it should be, and really just trying to finish a solid demo for people to check out, right? But as someone who's pretty much done my whole career in action games, and as we got some other creators into the space who also have done action games in the past, we wanted to take some folks' experience and then bring on some new people into the space and see what we could make. We wanted to take our way into doing an action game that was more manageable than a AAA product in particular. And so Project Bride is kind of our step into making a we haven't decided how many people, multiplayer versus single player just yet, but making an action, brawler style game that kind of takes inspiration from some of the other experiences that we've, really enjoyed, like God of War, Guacamelee, some other stuff like, what was it? Shank, and some other titles, kind of like a whole gambit from the years of gaming, essentially.
Yeah.
And then infusing that with some of our other inspirations from the Black Southern folklore in particular, and also the Gullah Geechee culture, which I come from South Carolina, and so that's something that I'm kind of sitting close to as far as that region of the world. But we were also very inspired by some of the art stylings from a certain period of time during for this culture, and how we can represent that for specifically a female protagonist specifically. And so we're kind of tapping into these other areas to kind of present something that we haven't seen in the gaming space before in the same kind of way. And I think it's going to be really interesting what we kind of come up with this version that we can demo hopefully within the next couple months is the goal. So this is going to be our first other internal project as a kind of more co-op formulated studio, right? And we're hoping to kind of put this out on our different platforms. This will also kind of be related to our Patreon that we are starting up this summer, which will kind of give our subscribers inside looks into this process, right? And also into play testing and that kind of stuff too. So we're kind of looking forward to being able to communicate with folks who are interested in what we're building in that kind of way, right? So yeah, that's the most I can share on that one right now.
Yeah, that sounds super exciting, and it's something that I think, again, it's so important to have that perspective in games where folks who are a part of game culture can share other parts of their culture not related to games through that medium that obviously is so so many people love games and so many people want to engage with games in a different way and in a way that introduces them to perspectives that are not their own, and I think it's such an immersive and important form of media for that type of interaction and dialogue. And it sounds really cool. It's actually coincidentally, I've been thinking a lot about revisiting South of Midnight recently, particularly to
Oh
like
yeah.
support compulsion games, and as they were affected by the recent Microsoft craziness. And it sounds like it has some, can draw some parallels between the project that y'all are working on, and what was going on with that game. And so that's really cool to hear, and I'm excited to support you all in that process and hopefully play it when it comes out. And if folks are wanting to, support MGK, and just check out what's going on, we'll have all those links in the show notes to do so. So that'll be great.
Yeah.
Me and Tim
Absolutely.
will collaborate on what the best links to include there are. But I kind of want to get into now a bit more of a philosophical or like values-based discussion, because as we've been talking about, like, video games are a medium that like inherently relies upon this front-facing presentation, as far as like you're controlling a character, you're seeing this constructed world that has been worked on over a period of years. And I'm wondering, like, that whole thing is what it is, it's what you're seeing, it's what you're engaging with. I would love to hear from your perspective, like, why is it important for players to like care about who is making the game? They see the game, they play the game, they have their own thoughts on the game. I like it, I didn't like it, I enjoyed it, I had fun. Why is it important for the creators behind the game to come from different identities, to make sure that we are supporting an industry that is made by not just white men in their 40s and 50s, for instance?
That's a good point.
Why is that important?
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because I enjoy so much range of media, right?
Yeah.
Big games fan, big animation fan, movies, the occasional book here and there, right? And so there's just so many stories that are there to be told, from so many different perspectives and experiences. And so I kind of see, like, I get a lot of value and see a lot of value in the experiences that people can have through storytelling by, someone sharing a particular view of the world through whatever kind of medium, through whatever kind of like style, right? And being able to learn from that experience about something new about myself, about another way of living, or just about like facts that I never knew about. But it is the kind of like the presentation and the experience of that learning, that is like kind of what makes storytelling so interesting. And so it's like, make something really cool, make something really interesting, make something very engaging, but also have something in there that is like real, that is true, that is intentional, that is resonating, to the human experience, right? And so I think that's kind of why it's so important for all of our media to have such diverse people involved in it, is because when you're only pulling from a certain pool of people, right, that have a limited range of experience in their life because how they grew up, because of what they've done in their life, because of where they're from, you limit the range of experiences that you can have and the range of knowledge that you can gain, and just like the types of things you could experience, just in this sole factor of like South of Midnight, for example, it pulls from a particular region of the world. It pulls from a particular stories that people have raised up in their mythos. And so folks complain about, oh, I'm tired of the usual Norse mythology being used everywhere. No wonder you see it all the time, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much else that's out there of ways of sharing ideas and ways of sharing, the artistic perspectives and these different stories that just don't always get to the mainstream or don't always reach as many people, but can we can have so many different kinds of experiences by pulling from them and learning from them. And so for me, that's extremely exciting,
Yeah.
to continue to do that, to continue to support that kind of stuff, to engage in that stuff. And it should be exciting for everyone else to also, be able to do that. So I think that's why it's so key that we continue to push for diverse voices and diverse creators from different backgrounds and walks of life to be able to leave their mark on our medium as a whole, and get a chance to tell their stories and present their ideas of how they interact with the world. And games to me is one of the most important ones because it's interactive. And so as much as
Right.
I love animation and think it's super powerful, when you take animation and add interactivity onto it, it becomes even more powerful of an experience because you can put yourself in the shoes of this character. And so I think that's why it's extremely important that games also especially do this to put people into different perspectives, and give us a chance to like have a unique experience that we couldn't have elsewhere.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing where I see games being so popular and a, uniting force for folks from so many different walks of life, as almost a double-edged sword, in that there's so much like money and barrier to entry behind like making it that you don't see as many, kind of like diverse games. But when one does come out, going back to South of Midnight as an example, like it shows so much potential for that like immersion to make an impact, where it's like people playing, God of War, where it's like a buff dude like going and killing Greek gods. It's like that's one thing, but seeing, the background of, a young Black woman in the South like trying to recover her mother and like going through just the entire story of interacting with folklore, interacting with grounded characters. Like it's so important for games like that to exist and for more to be made. And I think it's one thing for, the creators in MKG to feel solidarity with one another and community with one another. But it's another thing to like feel that support from the outside and feel like they have an audience continuing to want to consume those kinds of games. And that's why it's really important for me to like highlight your voice and organization, because hopefully this will just get a few more people on board, and that's really, I think, what can over time make at least a bit of change in this place that as you've described is like such an important place to be putting that effort into. And so I'm hoping that this interview is at least leads to a bit of change in that realm as well.
True.
Yeah, talking through some of just like a couple of the games that are smaller in scope that MKG has made as part of the collective. Maybe it's just one person from a game jam or a small team here and there over the years. I just wanted to highlight like a few others that were just fun as I was digging through y'all's itch page. Dig Deep is one where it's the conceit is you've just discovered like a precious family heirloom has been buried deep underground at an ancestral site, and in 24 hours a construction crew is coming to pave the site into a parking lot. And I don't know, like it's a game that if you looked at it, you would be like, oh, like a game jam game made with pixel art. Like it looks cool and fun, but it's again, that sort of thing where it has that story behind it that is so core to the experience of individuals who have been marginalized, not just in the game space, but like, throughout history, that is so important to interact with in this familiar medium. There's another one called Law and Judgment, Shadow of the West, that, tells the story of the legendary U.S. Marshal
Bass Reeves. Yeah, Bass. Yep.
A real life historical figure from like the Wild West, who is kind of like this legendary Black lawman. And I guess like I'm interested in your perspective on these smaller games that kind of have been threaded throughout MGK's past, and just like how you see MGK as an important space for the creators. You know, you've talked about some of the business efforts, but what is it like just interacting with the different creators within your organization, and what has been some of, you know, the feedback you've been getting as far as like what it means to them?
Yeah. I mean, those two projects in particular both kind of like came from different origins. Like Dig Deep, for example, was from a game jam. I actually worked on that one as a designer. And then Law and Judgment came from just like an idea, not even from a jam. Just some of our community members, you know, one in particular who had like the idea and had the time, was like, I want to work on, you know, a game about Baz Reeves. I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. Like, and this was before the TV show had come out, and so we were like, yeah, let's, and then a bunch of other people, you know, kind of like also decided to join and help out. Let's see if we could like get a demo made and like a prototype made, and what was possible, even with like the limitations of the team and the fidelity level that was going to be achievable, all that kind of stuff, you know. And so those two, but I mean, those two were like really good examples of, you know, I'm glad you pointed them out, because like, yeah, like the community at work, so to speak, of people meeting each other, and like trying to find some inspiration and find other people who would just like get it, you know, like without having to do any extra steps. It's just like, yeah, I want to talk about this particular thing with this focus of this kind of gameplay, right? And then you just know that everybody in the space, you know, would understand in some capacity, or like would like kind of resonate with the, you know, and when you wouldn't get any issues with the conversation or whatever, you know, it's just like, okay, like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's see what we can do, you know. So I think the Baz Reeves one in particular, we haven't had a proper like Baz Reeves game yet. We were trying to, we haven't, the project's on hiatus at the moment because the team that was involved in it had to kind of disperse, right? So, you know, we had to move on and have it just the code sitting there. And then I remember also like Strange Scaffold also was like doing their Baz Reeves game for a while, then also had to put that aside and cancel their project, you know. So it's like we just still don't have a proper Baz Reeves game just yet, unfortunately. But there's interest, right? Because the times when we put these things out here and, you know, and people see it, they're like, oh, that sounds really cool, right? So it was like, okay, like there's interest in these titles. We just need to finish them, right? Dig Deep in particular as well was neat because that was done in Pico 8, which is a very accessible game engine, very simple. You know, you only get a couple buttons to use to control a character, and that's it. You know, it's just like your standard kind of SNES type controller, so to speak, within a limited memory size, like old school stuff. And so that was a fun jam to participate in and see like how can we communicate you know, narrative ideas, and just a general like, you know, focused theme with a limited, you know, amount of stuff that we can do and achieve, right? And so we tried to maximize everything with the art that we were able to depict, with the general, you know, story setup, as well as you mentioned about having to go find your heirlooms and go back to your, you know, that grave site, and also just like the general gameplay of just doing the things and making it fun gameplay, and then kind of adding in these little extra little tidbits of like, what heirlooms do you find, right? You know, what is the little narrative piece, and having that kind of be representative of like, you know, some lived experience, you know. So but it's very important that we found to continue to have like that kind of space where we can have these conversations safely, you know, without any issues kind of happening from talking about these things and having to defend ourselves or having to validate ourselves, right? And being able to just like, let's just make the stuff, right, that we want to make, and make it easy as possible.
And that again is like, I think it demonstrates the need for spaces like MGK and the need for spaces like that to feel support from the outside, because it allows it to just be like a like yes machine, you know, for lack of a better term, where it's like
yes and yeah.
yeah, exactly. In an industry where like pretty much every game idea is told no by like a corporate entity, like it's so important to have these spaces where it's like, yes, let's do it, and have that, you know, yes and ethos as you're talking about. And so like that, I think, is as inspiring a reason as I can think of to support spaces like yours. And I hope folks resonate with that idea. Talking about kind of like the origins of Melanated Game Kitchen as a space where just friends were hanging out and making small games. I would love to hear more about its roots in game jams, particularly the Culture Bytes game jam series. In your mind, like, what is kind of the purpose of game jams as a space that developers can, for lack of a better term, like play in? And what have you learned hosting these types of events year after year?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of the jams, especially as time has gone on and the jams themselves have kind of evolved, so to speak. You know, they're the same things as a hackathon, right? But focused on games or art jams, you know. And so it's just like a valuable opportunity. I think, especially now, like the back when we had like one of the biggest round of layoffs last year for the industry, right? There were some groups that spun up afterwards, right? That's what's happening right now. Lots of things are being spun up brand new. And so there's a group that was spun up after this, and they decided to host a jam focused specifically for developers who just lost their jobs.
Yeah.
They call it the out of office jam, right? And so it was just like, let's make a space for people to come together, work together, and maybe, you know, if people find, you know, they got their friends, whatever, they get some focused attention, right? They might be able to put something together that they can use to continue to work on, to potentially find funding or support or start something new as a result of this new content that they're making, you know. And so jams really function really well as like a multi-tiered kind of like, you know, event where people can just make stuff for hobby. People can make stuff for prizes. People can learn something, a new tool that they want to learn to just level up their skill sets a little bit and try something new, right? Or people can bring a group of folks together and like focus their energy to make something that they can continue to build on, right? And all of that is possible. And so I think we started, you know, we keep doing the jams because we realize the creative potential that they bring, and also the level up period that they bring with that focused attention, and also just the community building that comes from the jams of being able to meet new people and to bring in other people into the space. So that's why we kept doing them, and we continue to make efforts to evolve the jam experience that we're be able to curating, and also to, you know, find ways to bring that jam experience to other groups as well. But at the moment, you know, we're doing a big annual jam right now, basically, where you know, we've traditionally done like quarterly jams that kind of like, you know, based around the season, right? And then recently, a couple of years ago, we started collaborating with Black in Gaming, which is another community organization, nonprofit, that does great work in the industry. And I have worked with them in a lot of community capacity over years now. And so we started collaborating with them to do a bigger jam that also had prizes and had sponsorships and had like a kind of like a more, you know, packaged setup, you know. And so we've been doing that annually now. And so we have our third annual Big Bite Jam is what we're calling this series, right? So it's Culture Bytes, which is our like smaller, you know, more, you know, contained thing, right? And then we have this Big Bite, which is like a larger experience, right? So we actually just announced that last week that the Big Bite Jam is happening at the end of July, starting at the end of July, and then going through the rest of August. So it's a month-long experience where we have, a focused theme as per usual. Like these are the key things, right? What is the theme that's going to be focused around culture? What aspects can we present to jammers to kind of give them context, to kind of have them learn something new, to have them explore something new, right? And then also giving event opportunities for them to be able to meet other people, talk, to discuss the themes around them, because sometimes they can be a little broad, right? So how do we focus people's creative attention, right? And then also give some guidance for technical expertise in terms of production, tool sets, resources, all that kind of stuff, right? We want to promote professional, at least the ability to do professional type of work, or promote those kind of processes, right? So all of those things, is like kind of our focus area. We continue to keep doing that. I participate sometimes if I have time to participate. It could be a nice time if I have the space, but otherwise it's fun to just help facilitate the creativity that people bring, and seeing what can come of that, and then also how we can support those ideas if people make some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's kind of that. I think it's important from the outside to see like, wow, look at these cool games that were made, if you just view it from like a product perspective or however you want to frame it. But I think the lasting impact of an organization like yours that hosts game jams is that like leveling up for the creators, where it's like, okay, you made this concrete thing that gives you confidence to make another thing and another thing, and continue to think about like scope and storytelling, and not worry as much about having like the technical like expertise, since that's what you're building in these jams. So that's really cool, and super important. Another reason why MGK is awesome. And we've talked a lot about the organization so far. If you don't mind, Tim, I would love to hear more about like just your story with games, as much as you'd be willing to share, as far as like, it sounds like you've been developing them ever since you were, in high school, a teenager. It sounds like you've had an interest in them lifelong. And I would just love to hear more about you and your journey with playing games, with making games. As much as you want to share, I'd be fascinated to hear.
I hear that. Yeah, true. That is kind of accurate. I have been engaged in game making in some capacity since middle school, actually, surprisingly. It's weird when I think about that, because I didn't foresee this becoming at least like a part of my career as a creator, right? I didn't anticipate that actually happening, right? But basically, I grew up playing all the usual, types of stuff: Zeldas, Mario, particularly RPGs. I got into RPGs when I was early, when I was like able to actually like, play them and get progress on them. I was fortunate enough during my middle school period to meet other nerds like myself, who also liked RPGs. And so it was a very rare thing to encounter, growing up in a Black neighborhood in particular. And so we each had some different interest areas, and we started just kind of like dabbling with making RPGs together in our spare time, after school sometimes. And we had RPG Maker and Game Maker during that time period, right? Some early iterations of it. And so we would just kind of take those, make characters based on like the Tales of series or Ys, and find Japanese emulators or Japanese versions of the game that we can check out and play. And I would design ideas and figure out like like move sets for the characters, and helping with like world building stuff. And one of the other guys, he would do the art and character designs, and we would just kind of dabble with that for a long time. So that's kind of how I got started. And then that then I didn't do anything with games for a long time. I'm a computer science background at college. I went to school at Howard University. And during my time there, I got introduced to like games as a
Mm-hmm.
career again while I was in university. And that kind of inspired me. And another one of my other close friends, who's also a designer, we were at school together. That inspired both of us to like pursue it professionally, and see if it was possible. And so I went to get my master's degree at Carnegie Mellon for their entertainment technology program. And that kind of gave me the chance to like make games with other people in a focused environment and get help along the way and learn from some of like the best in the business in that process. And so that was like what kickstarted everything as far as like being able to
Mm-hmm.
pursue it professionally. And then after finishing that stuff up and making some games for clients, making some, more educational based experiences and doing stuff in VR, I left and then got a opportunity to work at Monolith in Seattle to work on
Mm.
Shadow of War, right? And so that was kind of like my big first break step into the industry professionally. And then fortunately from that, I just kind of like continue to roll down the hill of
Mm.
contracts. Every couple years, my contract would end. I would try to find another gig at another studio, right? And that's kind of what's been my most of
Mm-hmm.
my career up until a couple of years ago. Um, but yeah, I mean, fortunately, in those years, right, I've been able to work at a large range of companies, working on Shadow of War, then going on to work at Microsoft, and building the early building blocks of Halo Infinite before it became what it released to be, and then going to work at what I considered a dream company for a long time, going to work at Crystal Dynamics, and working on the Avengers game and doing bosses, which is something you would think about doing on Elden Ring or these other, large titles, and doing bosses on that title, and then getting the chance to even go to the next level of, the top in my list of studios, and working on God of War, Ragnarok after that, and actually doing combat and working on enemies and all that stuff. So just like doing all of the action game things that I had dreamed of doing, from playing all these
Yeah.
JRPGs, playing all these action games growing up, of like, oh, I want to, Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, and all those kinds of things, and Kingdom Hearts is like, oh, I want to make these kinds of things somehow,
Yeah.
right? And getting the chance to be able to do that in a large scale, was amazing, right? And then going from there to dropping down to working at Brass Lion on the Wu-Tang title, which is not out yet, but is an action RPG, but a much smaller, condensed experience compared to all the other games I've worked
Yeah.
on before that, right? And getting a chance to use all of that. And so now, as the industry is changing, as things are adjusting, is okay, finding a new footing in the space of what taking all that kind of stuff and creating creating experiences that are well paced, are interesting, that are exciting, that explore interesting, unique mechanics, and challenge the players for expression and all that kind of stuff. Just taking all these things that I've grew up playing and have influenced me, and that I've been able to contribute to, and finding a way to use that in a different way, for these new titles that we're able to put together and collaborate with other people on doing. Really just I want to help ensure that like as many folks are able to kind of create like their vision, that they have of their experience, of like an action title, of a title that is like representative of like skill based gameplay, and using what I know to help help them able to make that happen, for myself, my own projects, and for their projects, so
Yeah.
yeah.
That's it's a fascinating career story. But I love how it starts from these like roots of you finding your people in a neighborhood where you were talking about
Right.
like it was
Mhm.
rarer to have those interests, and then finding your people and letting that drive your passion that eventually has evolved into a super successful career, and one that I'm I loved hearing about and will continue to follow with interest. I think I would love to hear you recommend some games for me and my audience. Feel free to have them be just like some of your favorites, even if they're, well trodden titles in the past, or anything maybe off the beaten path that we wouldn't have heard about before.
Yeah, what's the best way to give like a nice short list in particular? Yeah, so I'm not sure if all designers do this. I know there's some stuff that I do myself that other people do. Like, I'm thinking about like Kojima and other folks of like, curating games and keeping track of like their favorite things and giving ratings to stuff and all that, but with the Game Kitchen, right, and with myself personally, I started to make efforts to curate games for other people to check out that I would like recommend and give recommendations on things to check out and stuff. And so I do have some newer things that I've kind of been like, taking a look at and drafting to kind of share about this summer. Trying to get on like a monthly sharing cadence with people to kind of share these things. But some of the more recent things, we do a game club where we in our group and basically feature new games that are coming out that are just like all like just interesting, that might be inspirational and whatnot. And so some of those we played Dosha Divas recently. Really enjoyed that one a lot. As far as like an RPG, a micro RPG kind of experience, so to speak. And then Perfect Tides is another game that took me by surprise that came out. The sequel came out in January, and that one is more of a visual novel narrative adventure game, but the art style and the different just creativity of like communicating this person's experience, this character's experience in the story was really impressive, especially with some of the mechanics that reminded me of things like Disco Elysium or Disco Likes, as we call them now, that take place with like your character learning information about things and you being able to use those systems to curate your experience over time. It made me think about that a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, that was like pretty cool. So that one was really neat. And then it's another like more recent one. I would say Wax Heads was something we've also been checking out recently, which kind of speaks to my again another kind of narrative-esque kind of experience. But I've been enjoying these smaller games a little bit lately because of a little bit shorter. But yeah, you play in a record store, and you kind of, it's like a narrative game, but there's also little mini games in there as far as like you're managing the record store and stuff. Other stuff that kind of been on my radar recently, Pragmata, which is really fascinating new work from Capcom. The game that Capcom released a couple years ago, Kinutsugami, which I don't think it got enough publicity as it deserved, but for an experimental action tower defense game that has some art that I've never seen done that way in the game before. I'm very impressed with that outing, and look forward to seeing more of that one. And I have to give another little shout out for Keeper, which came out last year from Double Fine. Also with the experimental platforming, style games. It's just like really fascinating work to kind of see how you can take these. This is what games are for, these kinds of things. I love games a lot of times. Just kind of like, this is why we make games, because it's stuff that you can never do in real life. You know? So those are some, that's 6.
No, those are great recs, and I love to hear how your interests are so broad, and how in each one you are like appreciating the design in a way that seems like it's creating this cohesive, or not creating, but reflecting a, interest in continuing to build your skill set. And outside of your skill set, outside of work, just like an interest in games. Because obviously that's got to be what drives someone in this crazy of an industry, as it's continues to develop. And I know, like, my listeners certainly can hear this reflected in just like your story, but just getting to talk to someone who is such an industry veteran, so accomplished, but continues to have goals for what the future of games can be, and having that be such a positive force. It's meant so much to talk to you today, Tim. Thank you for your time. It's been an incredible conversation. And I just wanted to say again, like, you're obviously a super busy person, so it means a lot that you wanted to spend the hour with me. Thanks again.
I appreciate it, Johnny. Yeah, thanks for reaching out. It's fun to talk about this stuff, of course, for me as well, and to share with someone else who appreciates the craft, so to speak, and trying to give exposure to these things. And of course, if you ever want to talk games specifically, or just the business of it specifically in general, right? Like, that's my headspace is in there a lot, pretty much. So, looking forward to more of that. Yeah.
I would love to have you back on whenever we can make it work. But until then, Tim, thanks so much for being on Indie Game Garden. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. Thanks for having me.
And that was Tim. Talk about a Renaissance man in games. He is leading Melanated Game Kitchen. He is working on his own career, doing all these different contracts at AAA game studios. He is empowering creators every day, and building community all the while. So please do check out all the links in the show notes. Support MGK and Tim as much as you can, because not only is it just a joy to speak to him and kind of peer into his mind a little bit regarding games, he's also just a super nice guy and someone who is charismatic to the point of being able to make change kind of all on his own, and doing it every day. So super cool to be able to talk to him. As I said a lot during the interview, I am honored, and honored that you wanted to listen and follow along. If you want to keep doing that with the show, we are Indie Game Garden on YouTube. All the chats and stuff get posted on there, along with some short form content and a few other of kind of my projects and videos. We are Darth Malks on Blue Sky. That's just kind of my personal handle, but I do Indie Game Garden stuff there. And the best thing you can do to support the show is to just tell a friend. That is kind of the most meaningful thing, since we don't do anything but word of mouth for kind of marketing and stuff like that. So it means a lot to just get the word out about all of these wonderful indie creators and their projects. And I truly do believe that there is an endless amount of creativity there, and the more we can support it, the more it can be kind of fully realized. And that's what my passion is. It comes out in talking to these game developers, but really that's what it's all about, is allowing people to do their art and showing them, just like I want to show the creators of Melanated Game Kitchen, that we have their back and that we are here excited to engage in their projects, right? I think so often these days, in this era of like entrepreneurs and self-starters and what have you, there's such an emphasis on productivity, like go out and make something yourself, do something yourself. But one thing I like to keep hammering home for myself and just the listeners on this show is that the act of play is not only supportive for these creators, but it is creative in and of itself. And a game, a book, all of these very personal works of art cannot come fully to life without players, without readers, without folks who are willing to engage with their stories and mechanics. And so I encourage you to do that. Take a little bit of time out of your day to do that, whether it's while you're on the exercise bike, whether it's while you're winding down for bed, what have you. Find something that you can do to engage with the independent art that people are making, because so much of it is worthwhile. And just like Melanated Game Kitchen can show us, so much of it is important in developing our perspective as citizens of the world and as citizens of a world where there's so much history, there's so much fracturing in a lot of our social tissue that goes under the radar, because a lot of this media created by corporations is not showing the full perspective, the full spectrum of perspectives that are really important to be aware of. And the more awareness we can have, the better people we can be, the better we are able to engage in conversations, and the better we are able to get to know one another on a deeper level. And that's like one of the most joyous things I think we can do as people. So the fact that games can play a part in that is inspiring to me. And the fact that there are organizations like Melanated Game Kitchen set up for that explicit purpose, I think is one of the things that keeps driving me to do this show and keeps driving me to source guests like Tim, who are so knowledgeable about that exact thing, in addition to just being extremely talented practitioners in games at large. So thanks for listening along. If you have any guest ideas or just thoughts, you can email them to me at indiegamegarden@gmail.com. And other than that, I can just continue to guarantee that we'll have interesting guests on each week on Mondays for your enjoyment. So continue to follow along. I really appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.